Hello, everybody! This is your Foxywriter, Brandy Ackerley, and this week I have an apology for all of you. I spent all week and got everything ready for my debut since I'd read that as long as your account was verified, there was no wait time in YouTube. Then on Saturday night, I went to schedule in the stream and found out that while I could, there was a 24-hour wait time for YouTube to approve the change. Very frustrating. It didn't get through until after the time would have started. So, instead, I have moved that date to Sunday, January 23rd. Once again, I will be going live as of 9 p.m. PST. I can't wait to meet all of you live. I hope I'll see all of you there at the debut. Now, last week in Hunter's Gambit, we caught back up with Asashi and Hana and saw that they were starting to feel like they may have been working at cross purposes, since Hana is looking to kill the monster and trusting the humans to take after themselves, whereas Asashi has been putting all of her hopes into finding Kazunaha and sending her back home to Hidan, where she thinks Himiko's sister will be the most safe. In the end, both agree that if they dedicate their time to hunting the monster, they may be able to research it and bring aid to kill it before anyone else gets hurt. And now, on with the story. Let me just pull my book up here. Perfect. Richard gave the bottle one final violent shake before handing it to Kazunaha. Kazunaha was glad to be dressed again. Even with the warmth in the water of the cavern, she'd been starting to feel quite cold. She was glad that the waterproof bags had held, allowing them to bring an outfit each. She took hold of the bottle and her extraneous thoughts stopped. The bottle was cheaply made, the glass opaque, lumpy, and thick. She could tell by the uneven weight that the bottle had been blown in haste, by an apprentice too new to their craft to know any better. Worse, the unfortunate child hadn't even tried to hide the faults. Had it been from her family's glassworks, the offending thing wouldn't even made it to the child's master, let alone been marked. This bottle proudly bore half a stamp, probably as hard as they'd be able to stamp it in blue and red on the bottom. She wasn't surprised that she didn't recognize the name. Her father would have never dealt with a craftmaster who cared so little for his apprentice's work. Richard didn't seem to understand her hesitation. It's caused by a chemical reaction, by the Borneo fungus. It causes light but almost no heat. It's more than safe to hold. How much did you pay for this? She asked. The fungus? It's common back in... No, I mean the glass. This is terrible workmanship. He blinked at her levelly, and then rolled his eyes. Look, princess, just hold it over the side of the ship so I can read the name. Kazunaha growled at the idea of being called a princess, but held the light over the side while Richard crawled over the decking. Well, can't read it, he admitted. I think it's written in Piranha. Kazunaha pursed her lips. That was a good sign, though she would have expected the name to be in Kantuk, since most ships that ran through this area named their ships that way. Let me take a look. Richard crawled back onto the deck and took the bottle from her. Kazunaha took a deep breath and climbed onto the hull. The wood was rotting, but not enough to do more than crumble at the edges. She dug her nails in. It would hurt if she fell, but she did feel steadier traversing the outside. The name was mostly legible, though the paint was chipped and thoroughly cracked. Senta... Talariet. Talariet. Licenta Talariet. She started climbing back onto the ship. Richard grabbed her hand and helped her. It means sight to see, I think. Translating is much easier when I have paper to work from. Richard took a second look at her. I don't remember you saying that you spoke, Prana. Kazunaha smiled. My father believed that we should be able to speak to all our business associates and read their contracts. So in addition to those I can speak, I can read some Prana. though I can't speak it at all. My first language is Siangu. Siangu? Not Kantuk? Richard's surprise was understandable. It was the language they spoke to each other, the most common language in the area. Siangu was the only language spoken in the house until we were 5. We were only allowed to use Kantuk outside of it. What was your first language? I doubt Kantuk is the usual one spoken in Giza. He moved his lips over a language she'd never heard before, although it had a musical tonal quality. She raised an eyebrow, but he waved away her question. Durrani is the main language in Giza, actually. I learned Kantuk from a friend. Since it and Panya share a base alphabet, I can sometimes decipher it as well. He looked rueful, though not here, obviously. I never thought about trying to use languages that way, she said, considering. She noticed Richard shivering. What was that other language? It's not important. Those are the only words I know in it. He bowled past his words as if he were embarrassed. A sight to see is the name of the ship that we were looking for. Congratulations, Kazuha. If any of the original shipment remains, you and I will have made a lot of money. So, how do we want to go about exploring this thing? Together or apart? She trusted him, but she didn't want to be walking around on her own. You have amazing vision, but don't know much about ships or reading the danger spots. I think it would be safer if we were to go together. I only slipped. She nearly bit her tongue. It was embarrassing. She didn't want special treatment. Richard's face darkened. I hadn't made that decision because of your fall, Kuzunaha. After so many years, this place is a death trap of rotten wood and rigging. I would prefer to have someone watching my back as well while we go through it. At least I kept my dagger, she grumbled. He bristled. Yes, and should we find mine while we explore the lower decks, I want it back. It was a good dagger, made of Carnesian metal. They have some of the best iron and silver mines on the continent, you know. The Carnesian forest is on the other side of the Great Bowl, Kuzunoha said, staring at him. The Great Bowl was a lake in the center of a huge ring of mountains. According to the myths, the area had been a plain until the first monsters ripped and tore their way out of the earth. Kuzunoha had seen the maps. Now the bowl was nothing but water surrounded by huge mountains and rolling hillsides. Kuzunoha had always had a natural wariness about the place, mostly because Himiko's mother had always told her that the Great Bowl was where bastards were sent if they didn't know their place. She knew better than to reiterate that to Richard. He'd probably laugh himself silly. You can't be suggesting that you traveled here through there, she said. Not through it. The forest is near Kentar. They have a harbor there that almost rivals Jesus. It was how I reached the mainland. He looked up. Hey, can you see the ceiling from here? She glanced up. Of course. There are stones that almost look like teeth. Real sharp, pointy teeth. Stag stones. Can you tell how large they are? How high? The closest ones look pretty big. Bigger than me, not as tall as you. I'd say they're a good 40 feet up, though. Is that a bad thing? You look concerned. He shook his head. Stag stones form when water runs down from the ceiling of a cavern. Normally, I'd attribute it to this. He gestured to the water around them. But I'm worried it may be due to the river. The river that's been gone for years? Richard, even if it had been caused by that, it wouldn't be a problem now. Still, I'd feel better if I could get up there and look for cracks. Can you tell if the mast is close enough to the roof for me to take a look? It is. It looks like it may have carved a path through them, actually. We'll definitely want to check it then. I'll climb it and make sure that's safe. The mast was covered in some sort of fuzzy black growth. It smelled sour, like old socks without the sweat scent. Richard put on some gloves and tapped the mold. Where he touched, the growth stuck to his glove. What he didn't pulled back into the rest of the mass of fur-like stuff. He swore. Black mold. It can be deadly. I won't be climbing that unless there's no other choice. He pulled off his gloves in disgust and wrapped them in a small bag that he sealed and tugged on a replacement pair. Kazunoha turned back to the mast. That bad? He sighed. If you were to just touch it, no. However, if it gets in you, it can be very dangerous. It doesn't send out spores, though, so at least we won't have that to worry about. We'd better put cloth over our mouths and throw on thick gloves, though, just in case. A search of the top deck revealed only one room. The door was caked in slime, not mold, and they were able to wedge it open without too much trouble. The room inside would have been opulent before the shipwreck. The curtains, though half-rotted, were a dark green velvet, and the walls were covered with flecked gold leaf molding and rotted cream-colored paint. There was a dresser with greenish handles, perhaps from patina? Strewn around a table and chair in the center of the room were clothes and bones. A destroyed painting that may have been of mermaids or just a watery scene covered one large area on the western wall across from the door. Richard moved away from her side, but Kazunoha's gaze was locked on the bones. In the books, skeletons remained preserved long after the flesh had rotted away. This one had fallen apart, leaving a terrifyingly gruesome mess of once-living caltrops in the center of the floor. The skull had rolled on the table, complete with an unkempt Sienku-style bun. She moved closer, horrified to see that all the bones had been scratched, as if by hundreds of tiny teeth. Have you never seen a dead body before, Kazunoha? Richard asked. Of course I have. Even from our first meeting. He shook his head. I mean the long dead. Something like this. He'd moved to the other side of the room and was inspecting the dresser now. She looked away, swallowing hard. No, this is my first time for one dead long enough for the flesh to have... She frowned. Richard, there are marks on these bones. Maybe some sort of insect horde? Richard glanced at her rather than the bones, while he tried to pry open one of the drawers. On the water? They are underground now. She had the feeling he was rolling his eyes internally as he turned back to the drawer. It could be crabs and the like. They would have been drawn to the smell of death. Kazunoha took a deep breath and tried to shrug away her concerns and look for what they came for. The captain's hat had fallen to the floor, but had weathered the trip better than the curtains, even if it was still a disaster. She turned the cap up and looked on the inside. Most captains sewed their journey records into their caps. She could see some of the fine stitching, but didn't even try to read it. Most captains used the code, and this one had rotten skin and hair to be removed before they even tried. The man had a blade in a half-destroyed scabbard among the bones. She took a deep breath and reached down for it. The handle was moist, but the blade seemed to have weathered its time well, aside from a bit of rust. She packed it away in her bag, tying it tightly in, hoping that the crossguard would keep the weapon in her bag. She made a mental note to ask Richard if it could be saved later. A quick search of the rest of the room provided very little. She found an ivory-handled brush with a matching grooming kit near the cupboard, below the polished metal the man would have used as a mirror. In the drawers, Richard found a rotten bag of coins and 2 small music boxes. Both were rusted, but Richard thought he might be able to clear them out enough to make them work. They put all the items into one of the bags to take with them. Are we continuing on? She asked. Richard shook his head. It's nearly midday, Kazunoha. We'll eat lunch first and then start checking the lower level. And that's it. I love that chapter. Okay, let me just pull the book down here. Perfect. Now, what I like so much about this chapter is that I got to do 2 things that I have been waiting to put in a book since I first started writing. First, Kazunoha is insulted about a crappy glass product, while Richard thinks she's concerned with the light in the luminescent glass. I love the difference of perspective, how they both think that the other is going to be confused or know what they're confused about. It's just something I really like in writing. The second one is a pet peeve of mine, that in TV shows and books and movies, you'll find long dead bodies that are skeletons, sitting upright, clutching important items and such. This isn't what happens. Bodies fall apart and they decompose, and the bones don't stay together. Sometimes you'll open a grave where the body is being buried and therefore hasn't been moved, but even bodies in coffins will shift and move, if only due to earthquakes and the like. And now I'm envisioning a scene in a catacomb where the humans are getting pelted with tiny bones during one. It's a horrifying thought, which kind of makes it perfect for a gruesome scene. I may have to use it one day. And with that slightly more macabre thought than normal, I will end the chapter here. Remember, if you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. And if you want to make me the happiest VTuber in the world, please share the video. And hopefully I will see you all here on Sunday for my YouTube live stream debut.